Have you ever heard of a man so skilled in surviving the wilderness that experts believed nature itself could never have taken him down? A hunter, a tracker, a man who spent his entire life studying predators, living among bears, and surviving in some of the harshest terrain in North America, only to vanish without a trace near a remote lake in the Yukon territory. And when investigators finally discovered the scene he left behind, almost nothing made sense. His camp looked abandoned in the middle of normal activity. His rifle was untouched. His supplies were still there. His clothes were found in bizarre locations. And perhaps most disturbing of all, whatever happened to him left behind almost no evidence at all. Tonight, we dive deep beneath the surface of one of the strangest wilderness disappearances ever documented, the mysterious vanishing of Bart Schleyer. Bart Schleyer was not an ordinary outdoorsman. Born in Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1954, he grew up surrounded by hunting, wilderness, and survival. His father was a physician who also loved the outdoors, and from an early age Bart was introduced to remote wilderness adventures that would shape the rest of his life. By the time he graduated from Montana State University with a master's degree in wildlife biology, Bart had already developed a reputation as someone deeply connected to nature in ways most people could never understand. He worked in Yellowstone studying bear activity, learning how predators reacted to human behavior. He became highly skilled in trapping and tracking grizzly bears, often venturing alone into dangerous regions that few people would dare enter. Friends and colleagues described him as fearless, disciplined, and incredibly intelligent. Many even said Bart knew more about bear behavior than almost anyone alive. But Bart wasn't just a scientist. He was also an adventurer obsessed with pushing human limits. He traveled across Alaska studying dangerous terrain. He journeyed into the Russian Far East to study and trap Siberian tigers. It was there he met his future wife, Tatiana. By the early 2000s, Bart had settled in the Yukon territory in Canada, where he became deeply involved in bow hunting and wilderness exploration. Unlike rifle hunting, bow hunting forces you to get incredibly close to dangerous animals. It requires patience, silence, and nerves of steel. Bart had mastered all of it. He had hunted across multiple continents and pursued some of the world's most dangerous game. To those who knew him, Bart Schleyer was exactly the kind of man who did not get lost, which is why what happened in September of 2004 remains so terrifying. Bart arranged for a float plane to drop him near the Reed Lakes, an isolated area deep in the Yukon wilderness roughly 100 miles east of the Alaska border. The lakes are surrounded by brutal terrain, thick wilderness, and no roads. The only practical way in or out is by plane. Bart planned to spend time hunting moose in the region, camping completely alone in one of the most remote places imaginable. On September 28th, the pilot who had dropped him off returned to pick him up. But something was wrong immediately. Bart wasn't waiting at the shore. His tent was still standing. His gear remained at the campsite. Nearby, investigators later found Bart's backpack with bear spray, along with his radio and knife. The pilot tried repeatedly to contact him over the radio, but received no response. At first, the pilot assumed Bart had temporarily left camp. But as time passed, it became obvious something terrible had happened. Soon, friends and investigators arrived at the scene. What they discovered only deepened the mystery. Bart's inflatable boat had drifted 60 feet inland from the shore, filled with equipment. His bow and arrows were still inside the tent exactly where he had apparently left them. Nearby, searchers found a camouflage face mask stained with a small amount of blood. But there were no signs of a violent struggle. No major blood trails. No obvious evidence of an animal attack. Then, days later, investigators found more disturbing items scattered through the wilderness. A camouflage jacket. A camera. Small bones later identified as Bart's. But the scene raised more questions than answers. Authorities initially believed a grizzly bear had killed him. Yet experienced investigators immediately noticed strange inconsistencies. Bears are known to consume almost everything after an attack: clothing, equipment, remains, especially in isolated wilderness areas. But in Bart's case, large amounts of gear remained untouched. Even stranger, there was no sign of a bear den, no hidden food cache, and almost no evidence showing a body had been dragged or violently attacked nearby. One detail especially disturbed investigators. Bart's balaclava, the face covering he had been wearing, showed no tears, punctures, or major bite marks. Experts found this highly unusual because predators attacking a human typically target the head and neck first. Investigators also noted that the terrain around the campsite appeared strangely undisturbed. No crushed vegetation, no major signs of struggle, no clear drag marks. It was as though whatever happened to Bart occurred silently and quickly. Over time, the official theory remained that Bart was killed by a grizzly bear. But many experts privately disagreed. Rick Fernell, a veteran wildlife biologist with decades of experience in the Yukon, publicly admitted he found the entire case deeply unusual. He stated clearly that bears typically do not behave the way investigators claimed in this incident. He also pointed out another chilling detail. Bart's pants were discovered removed from his body. In many missing 411-style cases, victims are strangely found without clothing or with garments removed under bizarre circumstances. And once again, nobody could explain why. Searchers later found Bart's skull and additional bones, but even then, the scene failed to provide a satisfying explanation. The coroner admitted it was difficult to determine exactly what had happened because so many remains were missing. Even stranger, despite extensive searches, there was almost no evidence connecting the surrounding environment to a typical predator kill site. Those who knew Bart refused to believe he could have been easily overtaken by an animal. This was a man who understood predators better than almost anyone. A man who carried survival gear, knew wilderness strategy intimately, and had spent decades avoiding fatal mistakes in dangerous territory. Yet somehow, in one isolated stretch of Yukon wilderness, Bart Schleyer disappeared almost without a trace. To this day, many investigators believe there is something deeply wrong with the official explanation. Some think it was an unusual animal encounter. Others suspect something far stranger happened near those remote lakes. And when you compare Bart's disappearance to other mysterious wilderness vanishings documented over the years, the similarities become impossible to ignore. Experienced outdoorsmen disappearing suddenly. Clothing found in strange locations. Minimal evidence. Bodies discovered under bizarre conditions. It's enough to make you wonder whether the wilderness still hides secrets we don't fully understand. And maybe the most terrifying part of all is this. If someone as skilled as Bart Schleyer could vanish without answers, what chance would the average person have?